What if I told you that there is a mystery lurking in each of us that can change our perception of reality? Today we will delve into a world where life and death intertwine in a mystical symphony. The Cadavre is not just a dead body, it is the key to ancient secrets that have remained hidden from prying eyes for centuries. Angelica swung on an old swing attached by chains to the branch of a huge oak tree. This oak tree she remembered from her early childhood, as well as this swing. It was the first time in 5 years that she had come to her homeland to visit her loved ones and take a break from the city. In the past, when she was married, they often came to the village. Clean air, beautiful nature, great fishing and lots of mushrooms. It was a wonderful time for them. And then her husband decided to leave her for someone else. 5 years passed after the divorce and here she came. She had no parents for a long time. They died when she was a child. She was brought up by her mother's sister, Aunt Zina. Aunt Zina had her own children, the elder Yegor and the younger Glasha. Yegor lived on the other side of the country and rarely came to his mother. But Glafira lived in the village, having returned from the city. Her personal life fell apart, and Glasha came to her native walls to lick her wounds. That's how the two sisters ended up together. "Glashka, what if we drop everything and leave?" suddenly said Lika, turning to her sister. "Where to? It's written on our fate to live and die in our village." Glasha wrinkled her beautiful face. "To the big city. There you just need to get hooked and everything will work out. Work is already bad and you're still dreaming of something. You have to live now. I got a job in a new store," said Glasha, rocking her sister on the swing. "No, I'm going back to town soon. I have a job, you know, piecework," Lika said. Lika spoke several languages and worked in a translation agency. Her earnings really depended on her efficiency. Thanks to her work, she had traveled a lot in recent years. Glasha did not speak languages, and she had no education, but she had amazing taste and talent. She sewed beautifully and worked in an atelier in the city, but returning to the village, she has not yet grown clients, could not sit on her mother's neck, decided to work in the store for now. "Okay, stop dreaming, let's go help Mom." Lika jumped off the swing and hurried into the house. Both of them were busy with household chores, and Aunt Zina even kept a cow, so there was a lot of work. In the meantime, Zenaida prepared dinner and called the girls over. She baked a raspberry pie for tea, which they enjoyed with pleasure. "Glash, tomorrow Aunt Katya will have to take the groceries and money, her pension has been withdrawn." Zina said, "Take your sister with you, it'll be more fun. If you decide to spend the night, text me." "Okay, Mom. Lika, let's go out in the morning, in the cold, it's a long way to walk." "Mom, you'll pack us a snack?" Glasha asked. Glafira was not very happy about the prospect of going to the old farm, to her elderly aunt. But there was no choice. Zina had bad legs, she wouldn't make it. You can't get there by car, only in winter. Glasha has been going to her aunt's house since childhood and knows the path well, but every time she tries to make a detour to avoid one unpleasant place. Aunt Katya lived on the farm all alone. She refused to move to the village. Why she needed money, Glasha wondered every time, and also marveled at how an old woman lives in the middle of nowhere and is not afraid. Even there is barely a connection. To write a text message, you have to go to the swamp, which is about 300 meters from the farm. "Lika, let's go to bed, get up early tomorrow, and dress normally," said Glasha. "And what do you not like in my clothes?" surprised Lika. "If you go in a dress, sandals and a hat, you risk not to come at all," rudely replied her sister and hid in her room. Lika only grinned. In the morning, Glasha met her sister with an approving look. Jeans, t-shirt, sneakers and Panama. Grabbing their bags and backpacks, the girls set off. On the way, they chatted and laughed. When there was not much left to the farm, Lika said she needed to rest. "Let's go there, there's something there," Lika said and dragged her sister with her. When they got closer and Lika saw what had attracted her attention, the girl shrieked and grabbed Glasha's hand. There were old, drooping crosses sticking out everywhere. It was a forest cemetery, abandoned and creepy. In some places the soil had fallen into the graves and a hole had formed. The cemetery gave an eerie impression. "What is this?" fearfully exhaled Lika. "Cemetery?" calmly answered Glasha. "You've never been here?" "No, I don't go to graveyards," Lika answered a little frightened. "Are you afraid of the dead?" "Ooh!" Glasha waved her hands and suddenly faltered. A woman's silhouette in a white dress flashed among the trees and crosses. Glasha felt uneasy. "Let's get out of here." The sisters hurried to leave the place. It seemed to them that someone was watching their backs. They passed the abandoned village without stopping. As soon as the farm appeared, The girl slowed down and relaxed. "Why were we afraid?" Lika asked in surprise. "I should have gone around, but I was talking to you. I always feel uncomfortable there. Back we go the other way." "Agreed." Aunt Katya was working in the yard and was very happy to see the guests. She quickly set the table and seated the guests, and began to ask about the news. Glafira sent her mother a text message saying that she would stay with her. The sun began to set over the horizon when Aunt Katya turned pale and quickly drove them into the house. There was no electricity on the farm. Aunt Katya had a generator, but since she was a frugal woman, she turned it on for a short time. She stored food in the ice house and cellar, so there was no problem with that. Glasha was always amazed at such an ascetic way of life. "What happened?" Glasha asked. "It's late. We're late," Aunt Katya answered, lighting the lamp. "Aunt, what are you doing?" Lika was surprised. "You'll understand. By the way, where is Chij?" asked the girl. Chij was a cheerful dog of unknown breed. Know it, he was eaten. By who? A dead man in a casual tone of voice from the farmhouse owner. A cadaver. The girls were confused for a moment, but Aunt Katya continued her story. As it turned out, not long ago in the neighborhood there was a walking dead man. She comes and stands, watching, waiting. Here, she killed Siskin. He threw himself at her, of course. But she can't come in until you let her in. I'm scared to live. Maybe you're dreaming? Glafira said quietly. Katerina Matveyevna suddenly spoke, her voice sounding muffled and calm. She told me how it had all started. Many years ago, at the edge of the forest, there was a village. The village was old, 400 years old. Everyone mostly worked in the collective farm and everyone knew each other by sight. At the end of the 70s, there was a disaster. One family had a beautiful daughter, modest and pretty. Her name was Marinka. Her mom died in childbirth. The girl was left with a father, who in her soul did not dote. She grew up smart and loved her father very much. Meanwhile, her father was an educated man who worked as a doctor. His patients lived all over the county, so Gregory, as he was called, traveled on horseback. It's more convenient and faster. Grisha was attached to these places. He was respected and appreciated. In addition to medicines, he often used decoctions and infusions of herbs and berries. He understood a lot about herbalism and non-traditional treatment. The thing is that his grandmother was known in the district as a witch and midwife, by the way, the only one for many kilometers. Grisha received a medical education and skillfully combined these two sciences. That day, Grishka left for a distant village, giving a difficult birth. Stepan and a couple of friends, a local hooligan, came to the village from the city. As usual, they drank and went for a walk in the village. They molested girls and behaved ugly. And then they came across Marinka, who was returning from an evening milking. The girl was blossoming, a real beauty, so the guys pounced on her like animals. Alcohol spurred and heated up the guys, and they attacked Marinka. They dragged her into an old barn, where they abused her for a long time. Then realizing that she didn't react in any way, they just left her and ran away. Bastards! Grigory came back in the morning and his daughter was gone and probably hadn't been there since the evening. The cattle are not fed and not washed, dinner is not ready, and the laundry is not ironed. Something's happened. Marina never leaves without warning, especially not having done her chores. Father rushed to look for a daughter in the village, and so Grisha found his daughter, torn in the barn. Carrying her in his arms home, people lowered their eyes and parted. After all, many heard her cries and pleas for help, but no one came to help. Cowardice, fear, and indifference played no small part in this story. No matter how hard Gregory tried, he was unable to save his daughter. Marinka died at dawn the next day. Buried her in the forest cemetery. The village cemetery was located in the nearby forest and organized it long ago at the time of the emergence of the village itself. There were even a couple of stone crypts and a statue of an angel or a bird. The figure's face had been knocked off, only the wings were well preserved. After the funeral of his only daughter, Grigory withdrew, practically stopped communicating with people. Not 40 days later, as the one responsible for the death of the girl died, more precisely, he was strangled right in bed. The mother was hysterical, saying that it was Marinka deceased killed him. People shook their heads and thought in their hearts that God's punishment had caught up with the murderer. After all, everyone knew who the killers were, and yet they kept silent. My house is on the edge. This is the motto of these people. Later it became known that the two men involved were killed. It was quiet for a while. The story began to be forgotten. Suddenly, an old hobo who lived alone on the outskirts disappeared. The body was found in a ravine, as if it had been torn apart. Such horror former investigators have not seen. The police were called by the district police officer when the number of corpses began to increase rapidly. The worst thing is that they couldn't find the culprit. Those who remained in fear went wherever they went, and their thoughts all kept to themselves. Still, no one will not believe. Many villagers on the eve of the murder saw the late Marina. The bravest went to the cemetery but could not understand whether the grave was dug or not. After they went to Grigory, he just kicked them out. Then they turned to a grandmother, a witch doctor from a neighboring village, now a settlement. She ordered those who were still alive to leave. The Cadavre is behind these murders, and it serves the master who created it. I think it's Grigory who's lost his mind. But who would go against the Cadavre, said the old witch. That's just it. There are no brave ones. That's why it's better to leave everything and run. Grishka may calm down. And so it turned out. In the village remained only Grishka in proud solitude. Gradually everything decrepit. The man occasionally appeared in the village in the store. The road became overgrown and rumors and speculations turned into legends. No one knows if Grigory's alive now. If he is alive, he is now about 80 probably, but he's hardly alive. Katerina Matveyevna stopped talking and looked at the stove. It was hard to remember that story, but she had to. She had seen the late Marina herself, had known her in her lifetime. And what is a cadaver? Glasha asked with interest. Roughly speaking, it is a corpse which by virtue of certain spells and rituals rises from the grave and fulfills the will of his master. The master is the one who created the cadaver and a very strong sorcerer or witch. These are complex rituals that came from Haiti, voodoo magic. Glasha shivered as she listened to Aunt Katya. Lika also listened attentively without uttering a sound. Suddenly she looked out the window and shrieked, "What are you doing?" Glasha was surprised. "There!" The girl pointed out the window. "God save and have mercy!" Aunt Katya wailed and crossed herself. "Is that her?" Glasha asked quietly. Katerina only nodded. Outside the window close to the glass stood she, the late Marina, or Kador. Her face and body were in a terrible state, a half-decomposed corpse with empty eye sockets, a black mouth stuffed with earth. A decayed white dress and a wreath of artificial flowers barely clung to the remnants of her hair. No matter how one looked at it, it had been years. The girls backed away frightened and Aunt Katya couldn't stop baptizing. What they saw did not fit into the head of a normal person and contradicted all the laws of nature. Until dawn, they shook in the house, hiding in a room, and came out only when the rooster shrieked. There was no one in the yard, but a small flap of white cloth was caught on a rusty nail sticking out of the fence, so it wasn't a dream. "And who picked it up?" Glafira suddenly asked. "What do you mean?" Lika did not understand. If she's a Kador, she's doing her master's bidding, so who is the master and where is he? Also, why would he do that? We've only been here a week, Glasha reasoned. That's right, why is she picking on us? Just what I need is dead people, said Lika tearfully. I do not think it is the father. If Grishka is alive, why would he do that? Replied Aunt Katya. We must go there, said Glasha. Where? In two voices asked Lika and Aunt Katya. To the village. It's daytime, the dead are asleep. And if they're not? And anyway, why the hell should we go there? Did you get hit on the head? With her arms at her side, screamed Lika. I'm not going. Well, don't go. Glasha took offense and jumped out of the house. Glafira quickly hurried to the abandoned village. Shal did not turn around, offended at her sister. Aunt Katya is understandable, an elderly person. But Lika, coward. Finding herself in the village, Glasha went straight to Grigori's house. Aunt Katya pointed out his house and how to find it. Yes, among other abandoned and boarded up houses, Grigory's house looked like a swan in a pigsty. Not a bad life for an old man. The girl was sure that the man was alive. Knocking on the gate and without waiting for an answer, she went into the house. She smelled the odor as soon as she entered. A nauseating, cloying odor of decay and earth. Grigory was lying on the bed, and at first Glasha thought he had died of natural causes. But alas, he had been murdered, and it wasn't by his dead daughter. Grigory had been shot, probably in his sleep. Glafira jumped out of the house, gulping greedily for air. What on earth was going on? Or should she leave everything to hell, go back to the village, pack her things and go to the city, and take my sister with me? What are we doing? There was a voice behind me. It was Lika. Fool, you scared me to death. For a corpse, you're too loud. Well, what's there? The girl nodded at the house. A corpse? Marina? No, Grigory and not himself died. He was killed, probably with a gun. Glasha said as they walked away from the house. You understand a lot about bullet wounds, Lika grinned, but I understand about corpses, and he's been dead for a week, so it's not he who raised his daughter, Glasha shouted, though she was chortling, but she was scared out of her wits. Can we fuck him up? Eh? Let's go home? Lika whimpered pitifully. And Aunt Katya? She won't make it. Let's go to the village. I'll find a jeep with four-wheel drive and I'll come, suggested Lika. No, not today, answered Glasha. Why not? It'll be dark in a couple hours. You won't have time to get there and there's a Cadavre wandering around. Glasha replied with a sneer. But if you're brave, go ahead. In the evening, all three of them sat at the table in gloomy silence. Glasha was going through various documents for nothing. A document, or rather a commercial proposal, caught her eye. Having read the sheet twice, Glasha stared at her aunt. Why are you looking at me like that? Katerina Matveyevna was surprised. What's this? The girl waved the leaf in the air. Oh, they've tormented me. They want to buy the farm and the whole plot. And where am I going? I refused. But he, their landlord, was stubborn. He came several times. The last time I kicked him out, he even threatened me, complained the aunt. That's right, a freak, supported Katerina Lika. I think it's all connected, said Glafira slowly. What do you mean? Well, think about it. If Aunt Katya dies by herself, from a heart attack for example, or what already, this evil will kill her. What then? She has no relatives, at least no official ones, no will, I think. The farm goes to the state, and then it's a matter of technique. We're not relatives, don't forget. Why do they need a farm? Lika said. It looked like they were going to build a sanatorium or a club here. The places are beautiful, and the forest, the lake, mushrooms, berries, fishing. Replied Katerina Matveyevna, the box just opens. All that's left is to find the owner, and that's all. Glasha muttered. Suddenly a light laugh came from the door, and someone clapped their hands. Glafira and Lika quickly turned around and froze in bewilderment. In front of them stood the current owner of the collective farm, the local store, and a small cafe. Fyodor Stepanovich grinned at the bewildered girls. Well done, Katerina. She didn't talk too much. He praised the owner of the farm. Fuck you, I just didn't have time to tell everything, Katerina Matveyevna replied. Don't be rude. I don't like it, the man advised. Maybe you'll go away and we'll pretend we don't know anything. Lika suddenly spoke up. Shut up, Fyodor said affectionately and snapped his fingers. Suddenly Lika screamed and backed toward the window. In the light of the kerosene lamp, they saw the Cadavre. She stood as if listening to something. From horror, Glasha could not utter a word. She looked at the deceased with all her eyes. Her mind was racing with thoughts, one of which turned out to be useful. I'm surprised they didn't think of that sooner. You can kill a Cadavre by cutting off its head and breaking its spine. That must be where its power lies. If there's no Cadavre, they're safe. I guess so. Glasha's work was very good. Aunt Katya's axe, as usual, was propping up the doors to the room to keep them closed. In one leap, Glasha reached the door, grabbed the axe and with a swing blew off the head of the Cadavre. The corpse's head rolled on the boards with a resounding sound. Everyone froze for a moment. So that's how it is, Fyodor said slowly. But he did not have time to finish. Marina's father, Grigory, rushed into the room. The decomposition had already touched his body and face, and an intolerable spirit was wafting from him. Fyodor silently looked at Glasha, and she understood everything. Suddenly, the Cadavre headed towards the master. A second and the Cadavre's hands closed around Fyodor's neck. There was a low, sickening crunch and it was over. The Cadavre threw off the corpse like a doll and turned sharply to the women. He just stood there without moving. The silence of the night was broken by the cry of a rooster. Glasha boldly approached the dead man and peeled the amulet from his neck. At the same moment the Cadavre fell to the floor and the corpse began to disintegrate before the eyes of the frightened and surprised girls. After a few minutes there was only a little moisture left of the body. The same thing happened to Marina's body. The next days were spent in endless interrogations. Fyodor's death was ruled natural. Apparently the broken neck was overlooked. Anyway, they let the girls go and finally returned home. Aunt Katya was taken with them despite her protest. After a while, the girls attended the funeral service for Grigory and his daughter, hoping that they had finally calmed down and left. In a couple of weeks, the sisters were going to leave for the city. Katerina Matveyevna was persuaded to stay with Zenaida. And yet a strange story has befallen us, said Lika, stirring the sugar in her tea. They gathered under the apple tree at the table. Do not say. Cadavres, dead men, businessmen. Aunt Katya sniggered. Glash, what do you think? I think Fyodor knew everything. I've been talking to this and that and the picture has formed, replied Glasha. Don't talk, tell me. Fyodor himself came from this now abandoned village. He knew very well about Marinka. He had even seen her wandering along the street, Then he was simply afraid, and then came curiosity. Grigory could not accept the loss and turned his daughter into a Cadavre, selfish and stupid. Aunt Katya is right, the rite is complicated, you need to know the subtleties. But Grisha apparently knew everything if he succeeded. Years passed, Fedya grew up, went into business, but interest in the beyond did not lose. How he met with Grigory I did not learn, but I know for sure. Marina's father discovered the secret of Cadavre. Cadavre, the perfect soldier. He doesn't need anything. He has no emotions and worries. He doesn't need money. He's the perfect hitman. He killed Grigory as soon as he found out the secret and decided to make a Cadavre out of the corpse. An experiment, so to speak. And about the farm, Fyodor was planning to build an elite country club, but it didn't work out. A few days later, they left for the city to build a new life. And somewhere out there is an abandoned village where the wind walks through the streets. The unlubricated hinges of the gate creak. A crow sits on the fence, staring intently into the distance, toward the forest cemetery.